Good evening, colleagues. My name is Obake Mwatsi. I am the acting MD of Intellective's campus group. We are a training institution that is based in 5 countries across the SADC region, with 8 campuses across the 5 countries, namely Botswana, Namibia, South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Eswatini. We also have a footprint, of course, in Zambia, where we're also growing that market for training, specifically in health and social sciences and other areas of speciality. Forgive my not sharing my video. I am sitting in darkness. Unfortunately, I've just had a power cut. But fortunately, I hope I am audible and you can all hear me. I have the pleasure of joining the session in South Africa. I'm in Pretoria, South Africa, but I appreciate that much of our audience is across a variety of countries, across the SADC region mainly. Allow me first to extend a couple of housekeeping procedures before we get into the detail of today's session. Firstly, if you can please refer to the chat, that's the meeting chat. There is a link on the meeting chat. Myself, together with the rest of the team members in Intellective's campus, will, during the course of the session, send reminders through the chat for the attendance register to please be completed. Secondly, although we will be guided by our keynote speaker moderator, this is intended to be a interactive session. In the event that you cannot pose your questions verbally, if you can please pose your questions on the meeting chat. Either one of the team members will then read it out or invite you to read out your question or comment when the opportunity arises. There is a request as well. This is a CPD accredited session, but a request is through our keynote speaker who will address the details, is that we complete an assessment in order to enable us to be to enjoy the certificate, CPD certificate to be issued to you. The details of the assessment will come at the end of the session, but we will be guided by our keynote speaker with respect to that. The topic of this evening is the ethical considerations of integrative medicine. And it's to say you're balancing traditional and complementary approaches. Allow me to welcome our keynote speaker this evening, Karel Piet van Eerde, who is formerly referred to as Dr. van Eerde, who earned his PhD in holistic life counseling from the University of Sedona in 2012. He also holds a master's of metaphysical science and a diploma in business analysis. He is certified in integrative medicine by the Institute of Integrative Medicine of the USA. Further enriching his qualifications, Dr. van Eerde is a registered herbalist with the African National Healers Association. Before moving into integrative medicine, he is currently serving as the director at the Golding Institute. Alongside his colleagues, he provides evidence-based integrative solutions and training for healthcare providers and patients. Within the Institute, Dr. van Eerden's principal duties involve researching and developing new integrative medicine solutions and ensuring their safe implementation. Dr. van Eerde, a very warm welcome. Good evening.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Obi. Yes, it is an absolute honor and a pleasure to be here and to share one of my passions is the ethical practice of medicine and specifically then integrative medicine. Now, I am talking from a primarily South African point of view, but as we go through the talk, I am sure that you will recognize that the principles are applicable to any country. And much of what we are going to go through is actually very much common sense. It is just that we don't always think about applying specific principles to our medical practice. And so it is sometimes just nice to also have a overview again and to see what can we do to optimize our patient outcomes, because that is in the end what we focus on and what we really want to do. So I am going to share my screen quickly and then we can get going if I have the blessing of the team. Okay. Now, as I said, we're going to do the balancing of traditional and complementary approaches in integrative medicine. Now, what is integrative medicine? There are many different definitions of this practice. To me, integrative medicine is using whatever works for the patient. So there's this misconception that integrative medicine is 100% tree hugger medicine, where you say that anything allopathic is wrong. That is not what we strive towards. Integrative medicine is the combination of any type of medicine that is going to help the patient. So we're going to dive into some of the ethical challenges that do come up when we think about blending different modalities. And we're also going to see how we can strike this balance between informed or how we can help our patients make informed decisions and also not over prescribe and make misuse of our patients. So the idea of this talk then is that we can get a solid understanding of some of the ethical considerations that we are faced with in this field. Informed decision making is basically the superhero of patient-centered care. Informed decision and informed decision making allows our patients to be empowered and to be active participants in this whole journey. And we're going to look at why this is important. We know that when a patient has knowledge in hand, they can then become active participants in their decisions. And the day of the doctor being seen as a deity is, thank goodness, over. And why I say that is we are so used to blindly trusting practitioners. And we've seen what blind trust does in practices and for people as a whole. If I can work with my patient and then get a better understanding of the patient's situation, inform the patient about their choices within their specific structure, then we see that the patient outcomes are many times much, much better. So on the one side, we have informed decisions, and on the other side, we have patient autonomy. Patient autonomy is all about respecting our patients' rights to make their own choices. It's their body, it's their choice. And we are only here to almost like a dance, to waltz with the patient. We guide them, we lead in the waltz, but the patient is the one who then has to take that step of faith with you and step backwards and step into that decision. So I those of you who know me know I'm not a medical doctor. So as a herbalist, my training was slightly different, and my focus area at the moment is very much on exploring the mind and the subconscious. And so I think in pictures, and throughout this talk, you are going to get a couple of pictures that you can hopefully work with. And that is something that I have learned also really works well with our patients. And we'll see a bit later how we can translate very difficult principles into pictures, and our patients can then relate to that better. I spoke about balance in the second slide. This is when we walk this tightrope between, again, the possible benefits of a therapy. On the other hand, we have the negative effects that a therapy might have. We walk another point, or we discuss another point of what if you are now going to step out of the norm. It's a scary, scary space, both for practitioner and for the patient, because we don't know what we're going to do. We don't always know what the outcome is, or how our colleagues are going to receive how we practice medicine. And again, the focus here is not just on medical doctors, it is on any health practitioner, because luckily we see more and more that each one of us has our place. And together, when we work together, we can then start finding these balances. So our idea when we balance our benefits and risks with the patient is to bring in the ethical considerations, the monetary considerations, which are very much ethical, and also to step back and ask ourselves, what am I doing this for? Why am I necessarily suggesting therapies that are off-label or not seen as the norm? What is my driver? Am I doing it just to be obstinate? Am I doing it because I truly, truly believe in a different way of thinking? Have I become so disillusioned with my specific field of study that I want to completely break away from it? Or is my focus the patient? So, very important is that we have transparency in our communication. It is not only an ethical requirement, it is a legal requirement. And we are going to go through some of the legal things a bit later that does affect us as practitioners. So transparency brings this beautiful clarity and trust in our provider-patient relationship. It's with integrative medicine, this communication is lifting this curtain into the world of understanding ourselves as human beings, more than just saying, here's a pill, drink it because you're going to feel better. The approach of transparency in our communication is, this is what this pill can do for you. This is why I would suggest this kind of approach or intervention. When we take the time to explain to our patients, they become well informed, they become active participants in the process, but also they build a lot of trust with us. Because of that, I often hear in practice, because we see a lot of patients for cancer therapies, that they feel like just another file number when they walk into a practice, or they feel like a slab of meat just going through the process. And here, open communication would be one of the first steps that we then take to bring this balance in. Just because we know better doesn't mean we can enforce better. That sounds a bit stupid, doesn't it? But it's very, very true. We need to respect our patient preferences and their beliefs. So everybody has their own way of thinking. Everybody has their own expression, their own history, their own genetics. I mean, biochemical individuality says that every patient is going to be treated differently, and we need to look at them as an individual rather than just a set of symptoms. But with that, we have to bring in the belief systems. I love Africa. I love being in this continent of so much growth, of so much diversity, and learning about different ways of being is something that is, it's a real passion for me. And if we can bring that in and say, okay, I understand that you do not want to use this type of medication because of your belief systems, I can adjust my therapy. Being flexible in the integrative world is an absolute necessity. It's not just a nice to have anymore. We need to be able to be flexible and say, this doesn't work for you. I get that. Let's go into something else. Okay. I always laugh when I look at this slide because in the past, and we do still see this quite a bit, collaboration between healthcare providers is not something that oftentimes happen. Unless, of course, you refer as a GP to a specialist, because that is what everybody has to do. But for me, it is so important to know who to contact, who to be able to refer to. I don't know everything. Goodness knows, I know very little. And knowing that I know very little helps me to know that, okay, I don't know much about this patient circumstances. Let me refer them to somebody. Not to get rid of this patient. Far from it. The idea is to refer them to a colleague, a friend, and ask them, let's work together. Let's collaborate for one patient. We know that many practitioners are numbers practitioners. Their focus is on blood results and test results, and when they do their diagnostics, they look at the paper. They don't oftentimes look up, which makes a patient feel not seen, not heard. Yet they get beautiful therapy. Now, what we do in our practice is, when we have a practitioner that works on that beautiful in diagnostics, then they would also then refer them to the person who looks you in the eye, who's not necessarily the diagnostic patient. And in my practice, what we do is they would see my colleague for an hour, first consultation, go through all the intense things, and then they come see me for another hour to basically translate what he said into something that they can work with. And so interdisciplinary teamwork in integrative medicine is really important. And some practitioners tell me it's a nice to have. For me, I don't know a lot about nutrition. So I have a very good nutritionist or dietitian that I refer to. And it's not that I'm losing the patient. That is the fear that many people have. It's like, it's my patient. Don't touch them. How does that help the patient? You know, enough sick people to go around, and for us as practitioners to be able to help people. And we also know that when we have that beautiful sharing of information, of energy with our practitioners, then they go and tell other patients. And so the practice, instead of going empty because you are now referring people or sharing patients, that practice grows beautifully because people are heard, people are seen. And those are two things that, to me, as an integrative practitioner, are really, really, really important. So, again, it is important if we take a step back also and we look at people's personal beliefs. Not many medical doctors are going to Twasa. Not many medical doctors are going to become Inyanga. So now, if a patient comes and they would like some traditional medicines involved, what do we do? And we're going to go into some cases as well, but being able to refer and know an Inyanga is really important in my mind. Even if one doesn't necessarily, again, understand how they practice, but respect the patient and then have these collaborative structures in place. Okay, safety and efficacy of complementary therapies. How many times do we hear from patients and from practitioners, oh, it's natural, it's not effective, or, oh, it's natural, so it's safe, I can drink whatever I want. I mean, we don't even have to have a slide of this, but we do because people think that natural is safe, always. How does that work? And how does that affect our practices? We need to think about the ethical part of natural medicines, of complementary therapy. So not only whole plant medicine, for example, but also nutraceuticals and some of the other therapies that are coming out. Ozone therapies, yes, it is seen as allopathic, but also not really. So where does it fall? Is it safe? How effective is it? And we need to know about these things. If we sit with a patient who is on warfarin, I had this last week. One of the people working in the same complex as we do was put on warfarin. And I just mentioned to him in passing, don't eat grapefruit. And he said, but that's what I have every single morning because I am diabetic. So the doctor told me to eat things like grapefruit. And then a different doctor put me on warfarin. And there wasn't this notification that they both go through the cytochrome P450 pathway, which means your half-life is doubled, which means if that patient was to start bleeding, he would to be in trouble. So when we look at things like the safety and efficacy of our complementary therapies, we want to know that there have been studies done, and we also want to know about herb-drug interactions, herb-herb interactions. It's not just drug-drug interactions that we get. A lady is on the pill, and she feels a bit down, so she reads somewhere that St. John's wort is great for slight depression. So she drinks St. John's wort, and she falls pregnant because St. John's wort negates the pill. So yeah, we can have many of these examples, but natural does not mean without interaction. Natural does not mean safe. Natural does not mean without side effects. And that is a message that we have to understand as integrative practitioners. The same with the other complementary interventions. It doesn't mean that it's not going to be of any benefit. I do a lot of photobiomodulation, so laser therapies, and it's my absolute passion. We put fiber optic cable into our patients' veins, and we shine, instead of injecting them with a liquid or a fluid or nutrient, we inject them with photons. And instead of milligrams, we work with wavelengths. So and wavelengths and frequencies. Now, one would think, oh, it's laser, it burns. Photobiomodulation, not necessarily. But I have to be very, very aware of my patient, because different skin tones have different reactions to these lasers. I cannot put a blue laser on any person's skin at a specific strength. It is going to burn. So we need to be sure of our therapy. It's not just quickly Google something and implement that. Of course, the other side is also true. We do get people who are snake oil salesmen. And I say that with half respect. People who are out there just to make a quick buck and make empty promises. And so when you implement any complementary therapy into your practice, to me, it's a no-brainer that you do some homework. Don't just trust a rep. Sorry, reps, I'm not picking on you. A person, let's put it that way. Don't just trust a person who comes and says, oh, this toy, this device will help reverse your patient's diabetes within 2 weeks, and all they have to do is jump on it 7 times a day. Do your homework. I think that is a really, really important thing. Play a bit of detective in this. Conflict of interest is something that is also quite a big thing for me here. So we know that you cannot be in practice and also own a laboratory, for example, as a medical doctor, because of the conflict of interest, the possible conflict of interest. We know here in South Africa that a GP and a specialist are technically not allowed to share premises because of the potential of conflict of interest, where the GP will refer to the practitioner over and over just because they are close to each other in proximity. The same here. In integrative medicine, we need to know that it's not okay to send our patients to the traditional and complementary therapists just for the sake of sending them. It is a big challenge, because we see that just like in purely allopathic settings, some practitioners, when you go see them, doesn't matter what challenge you have or what condition you have, they will put you on a very specific regime of medication. And you start getting that name of, okay, you are the ex-doctor doing specific things. We have to be unbiased. Our patients deserve unbiased and trustworthy care, not this is my identity as a practitioner and let me then push it on and then fill my cousin's whatever practice they might have. Again, it's true for everybody, but it's not something that we mention enough. Okay. Placebos work. We know they work. There have been studies on the efficacy of placebos. Now, as a practitioner, how do we ethically make use of placebos? Do we use them at all? Now, I want to throw the idea of a placebo on its head slightly and talk about the power of the patient's mind. Because we can, as practitioners, tap into that power. My personal favorite is using neuro-linguistic programming to help patients' outcomes be better. So we, as practitioners, you retrain the subconscious response to specific triggers. In our practice, there was a patient who came in his late 70s, early 80s, and he had prostate cancer. His oncologist had given him 3 weeks to live. He came in, he saw my colleague, and he was asked, so why are you here? Why aren't you spending your last moments on morphine and with your family? And the gentleman said, well, my wife has Parkinson's, and we don't have family in the country. They're all across the world. So if I were to die, nobody would take care of my wife. Finances were a challenge for them, so they were put, or he was put, on a very basic protocol of nutraceuticals. He was given a drip every second week, and he lived for 2 years. One day he didn't come into the practice, and so our practice manager got hold of his daughter overseas, and she said, well, my mom died a week ago, and a couple of days later my dad passed away. The nutraceuticals that we gave were basic. Yes, they gave him the ammunition to fight, but if he did not have that will to live, that reason to live, well, things would have been completely different. And so if we apply that to the idea of placebo, if we study the brilliance of this, of the subconscious, and we can have potential benefits without lying to our patients, but with nudging them. Neuro-linguistic programming, the beauty of that is my patient is very much aware that I am going to now work in their subconscious. So they give me permission to mess around in their brain some. But we program a better outcome, and the mind is capable of that. So when I talk about placebos, yes, there is this massive ethical question of, do I give this to the patient? What if it doesn't work? Versus, what if it works? So there's no, in my mind, true answer. We have to look at this case by case, but keep in mind that the mind is powerful, and we can bring that in to our therapies. Okay. Now, this is a slide that makes many practitioners squirm, especially integrative practitioners. Both in irritation, or the alternate, of course, in recognizing what we are doing to our patients. So because many of the interventions that we do follow in integrative medicine don't have procedure codes, many of the products don't have NAPI codes, it's a free-for-all for many people. And so we will see a colleague who scripts a drip with a cost price of $10 US dollars, and he will insist that patients buy these scripts in batches of 10, but that costs you about $2,000 for the batch of 10 drips, where his cost is below $200. It's actually it's about $100 cost, and you charge $1,000 plus extra things. How ethical is that? How ethical is it to milk our patients just because some of them can afford it? And I mean, I get irate every single time this happens and every single time I talk about this, because yes, we know integrative medicine, or as practitioners, as human beings, we are in a society where we have to earn an income. We have to put bread on the table. Fair enough. But at whose expense? So we have to be transparent in our practices, integrative or not, but more so in our integrative practices. And we need to avoid financial exploitation. Again, not just ethical, but legally. You cannot overcharge people. There has to be a cutoff point. So be very aware of your markups on products, on interventions, on therapies. We can't just say, oh, it's not regulated at the moment, so let me charge whatever I want. Okay, so ethical marketing and advertising practices. The bane of my existence at the moment is intravenous labs or drip bars. Legislation is different in different countries, but you see these companies pop up. You walk in into a shopping center, you order a number 6 with extra glutathione on the side, just like you would do in a McDonald's. You order Schedule 4 medication. And people flock. It's the latest craze. Let me go for my drip and have a glass of champagne and put it on social media while I do that. But further to that, we start seeing on social media, we start seeing in magazines advertisement of things such as drip therapies. Now, what would happen to a pharmaceutical company if they were to advertise specials on Schedule 4 medication? It's not legal. We cannot advertise these things. But how do we make people then aware of integrative services, integrative procedures, and proper integrative procedures? One of the other challenges that I'm faced with when we look at IV nutrient therapy is people do skin lightening. And they advertise that you do skin lightening in many of these institutions or companies. What they don't tell the patient is that if you do this specific recipe, and this is the only recipe that I refuse to teach people, because when you use glutathione and the other things in high doses and short frequency, you change the color of the patient's melanin from brown to pink, which raises your risk of skin cancer. That's not told to people. So how ethical, again, is that? You can see this is one of my big passion areas, is what do I do with this information? Glutathione, for example, is a phenomenal compound. How do I get the message out there without firstly breaking ethical and legal guidelines for marketing, but also giving the patient all the information? Now, the way that we do it in our practice is we have regular newsletters, not selling products. Our newsletters go out and we would look at the importance of proper detoxification in the liver, and how does glutathione then help you? So in our marketing, if you want to call it that, we focus a lot on patient education. Not, we have this cool new product and come and buy it and get 20% discount. If you want to do things like the discounts, you can absolutely do so on non-medical items. So yes, technically you could sell vitamin C at a discounted price. perfect. When we go into the scheduled items, not anymore. So it's always important for me that we are aware of these balances that we have to keep. Okay. I mentioned earlier, I adore Africa. I adore being here. We've had so many chances to move to other countries and other continents, but I choose to remain here because I have a passion for working with the people here and learning about people and connecting with all these different people. There's no other place than Africa where we have this mixture of energies. And if we can do this all with respect and realizing that each human being, each patient that we see comes from a different background. Neuro-linguistic programming again teaches us that the map is not the territory. The way that you perceive the world is not the world because you perceive it from your own filters. Just so, every single human being that you work with recognizes or experiences things from their own filters and their own backgrounds. And if we can realize that, we change the way that we practice. Vulnerable populations. It's very cold in Africa. Well, in South Africa at the moment. We had snow for the first time in a decade on Monday. What do I do as an integrative practitioner, as a practitioner of any form of health? What do I do to help the vulnerable? This is a sad reality that many of the interventions that we are faced with or that we have available are very costly. A lot of times we have to do our own research into things, and that costs money. And so we have to pass on that those costs to other people. And this is where I know Dr. Jackie, for example, they do amazing work in trying to reach the vulnerable. So this isn't necessarily an ethical thing, but a thing of conscience. What am I doing as a practitioner to also assist and help to ensure equitable access for our marginalized communities? What can I do? Can I spend a day a month helping out at the clinic? Maybe. Can I offer a colleague who works in a rural area a masterclass, or as a specialist or somebody with a special interest? Can I offer that they bring their difficult cases to me now and again? Can I organize a book club? So we don't necessarily have to throw money at our patients, at those who are vulnerable, but we can help in many, many, many different ways. Then we are here because we want to maintain our professional competence. Same thing with integrative medicine. Things keep on changing. New information comes out almost on a daily basis. So what am I doing as a practitioner to offer my patient the best outcome? What am I doing as a practitioner to study further to make sure that I know about different options? Now, integrative medicine, when we do one of our introductory courses, practitioners laugh at me because I go into the story of we are going to close the book of allopathic medicine. It's a beautiful book. But we're going to slot it back into the library and see that there are many, many more books of healing in this library. And it's not that we're throwing the book away, but we're just browsing through some of the other books. They laugh at me, and then at the end of the 3-day introductory course, they are gray. with information overload. So when we embark on the integrative journey, it is so often that people will come and say, it is overwhelming, it is too much. We can't know everything, but we can know a bit about many things, and then we know who to refer to and grow into our own area of passion. Like I said, my area of passion is the laser therapies, and just seeing what these different photons do to the cells it's phenomenal. Which means that I can't do a lot of hormone therapies. It's out of my scope of practice in any case, but it's not my focus. So as soon as I hear about hormones and it gets deeper than cortisol, then I refer them on to the colleagues downstairs. So yes, studying is very important. This is true not just in integrative medicine. It's not just an ethical thing, but we know that legally we have to safeguard our patient confidentiality. Now, every country will have their own set of laws. In South Africa, we have the POPI Act, as well as the Medical Act. But POPI Act brings up a very interesting challenge here, because it says that you are not allowed to identify your patient in any way. And last week, somebody shared a photo on Facebook, which got me laughing, because they say, now, how do you apply POPI in a medical practice? You, as a practitioner, walk out of the door legally. You are not allowed to say, Mrs. Johnson, you can come through, because you have just identified your patient to the people sitting around them. So what do we do? We need to also be very practical and know that we can't do everything perfectly. But if I use electronic ways of storing patient information, I mean, that's a massive, big thing at the moment, is electronic record keeping. Make sure it is encrypted. Make sure that only you have access, because you as the practitioner are liable for that patient information. If you still use the old paper files, that's what we still do. Both myself and Dr. Golding, we like writing. So we still use the old paper files. But the filing rooms are locked, and only specific people have access to that. It is a legal requirement. So when I want to discuss a case with somebody, I can't just go and talk to somebody, phone them up and say yes, and read the whole thing. Patient permission, of course, and also redact information as far as possible. Okay. Now, recognizing and managing scope of practice. This isn't always thought about by medical practitioners, so general practitioners, for example. Your scope of practice is quite wide. So you are allowed to script and test hormones, for example. As a herbalist, way out of my scope. Most things are out of my scope of practice. That's why I love teaching and sharing, because there is so much, and we're allowed to share that. But knowing what your boundaries are. IV nutrient therapy, again, as an example, in South Africa, Health Professions Council has confirmed that IV nutrient therapy must be scripted by a medical doctor. Period. Dentists, out of scope of practice. Clinical associates, it's out of scope of practice. Paramedics, even though they are allowed to script and administer morphine for a patient, they are not allowed to script and administer glutathione. It's not in their scope. So we need to know what we can work with. And again, if I reach the end of my scope, let me hand over, let me work with somebody, and let me refer to them. Nurses, it's a bit of a different story. We're still waiting for Nurses Council to tell us if it is within scope or not. In my mind, and from legal opinion that we did get, nurses are not allowed to script IV nutrient therapy. They're allowed to administer, but they're not allowed to script it because they're allowed to script things on the essential medicines list. And most IV nutrients, that the way that we use them, are not on that list. So, but again, that might differ from country to country. Okay, informed consent and decision making. When we see patients, we will not allow them to start the consultation if they have not signed their informed consent. Integrative medicine makes use of a lot of off-label interventions. And so if we don't have an informed consent, the patient can turn around if a therapy doesn't work for them, they can turn around and say, yes, but you were not following protocol. So see how important what we said in the beginning about open communication is here. The patient needs to know what we are expecting from a therapy. The patient needs to know why we are suggesting to implement a therapy that is different from the norm. So, informed consent, also, if we have a look at the Customer Protection Act in South Africa, patient needs to understand. It's not just here is a bunch of rules and regulations, sign. And if you don't understand, sign. Informed consent means that the patient understands what they are signing. It also means that they understand fully the interventions and the processes that we are suggesting to them. So, hint for the test later on, get yourself informed consent done by a lawyer. If you can't understand, or if this document is written in legalese, send it back, reword it in words that the patient can understand. If they can't understand it, that document doesn't mean very much. So yeah, informed consent is of paramount importance for us. And it's quite a hefty document that we use in our practice. A question has come up when we spoke about this in a previous or in a different forum. Do you need the patient to sign for each intervention? I would say no. As long as you have the first one and your patient, you have taken your patient through the explanation every time, and that you have noted that you have told your patient, this is what this specific therapy is going to do for you, or the reason why we are implementing this therapy instead of what the traditional approach would be. So make proper notes, have the informed consent. One of the other things that I'm not sure if it's going to come up later, but in an integrative practice, unfortunately, integrative practices and medical aids are not on the same page yet. That means that medical aid would tell you, see a patient every 12 minutes as a GP, every 8 minutes, sorry, as a GP, and every 12 minutes as a specialist. I need at least an hour first consult with my patient to go through what they need, who they are. And so we cannot, as integrative practitioners, unfortunately, be then fully involved with the medical aid. So what we do in our practice, It is in the informed consent that the patient acknowledges that medical aids will not reimburse them fully for whatever they come for as a consultation fee. So all those things are in the informed consent. Do yourself a favor, save yourself a lot of heartache. Get these documents ready.
The airport in South Africa, the airport should be okay. The airport building itself.
Sorry, would you mind just repeating that?
I think it was a problem with muting CP. Carry on.
Oh, okay. Or they just gave my voice a bit of a break. That's also good. Managing our patient expectations. Snake oil salesman. I cannot promise my patients specific outcomes in integrative medicine, just as I cannot promise them specific outcomes in allopathic medicine. We know what should happen, but it doesn't always happen. So again, open communication. Make sure that I'm telling my patient that the intervention that we are going to do might work, it should work, but it might also not work. Their decision then is, let's go for it, yes or no. We have to give them realistic information about unrealistic promises or guarantees. So let's talk about weed. Let's talk about cannabis. It is seen by many as the only cure for cancer, the only thing that will cure all cancers. I have, because I do a lot of counseling for our cancer patients, and I still do home visits now and again if they need it. But I've had to hold a lady's hand where she said to me, I put my trust in this cannabis and yet I'm dying. And I put my trust in the cannabis because some practitioner told me it's going to cure me. I love cannabis as a therapy. It has helped many people, but it's not this thing that is going to cure all cancer. So we need to be very, very clear with our patients and manage their expectations. If a patient comes to you and they say the Rick Simpson protocol of cannabis is going to cure my cancer, what do you do? Do you say, okay, let's go for it? Or do you tell them that it might help, but be very careful of putting all your trust in one therapy? So just manage these expectations. Again, if I don't manage patient expectation, even if they come with a printout from some website, and they say, okay, I want this therapy because it's going to do that. It's really important for me that we tell them it might help, but it might also not. Or I don't know enough. It's such a difficult thing for us as human beings to say, I don't know. But here it is really important to be able to say, I'm not sure. Let's find out together. Okay. We've spoken about documentation and record keeping already, so keep everything right, keep everything clean, and safe. Then we've spoken about the collaboration and referral networks. There are different societies and groups of practitioners that one can join, and it is beautiful to see that there are communication channels where you can quickly post your question and 2 or 3 other practitioners will say, oh, I've seen that, try this. So having a referral network is really important. We don't have to work in isolation. We don't have to feel as if we are standing alone on an island screaming for help and nobody hears us. Reach out and create study groups, create these referral networks. I think it is a healthy thing for practitioners to do. Okay. Evaluating and addressing patient feedback. Now, we need to listen to our patients. Patients come back to us and they give the weirdest and wonderful things. And through their stories, we need to then find what is working. We need to find out what their concerns are, how we can address their concerns, and not just brush it off. If somebody tells you that I don't feel well, listen to them. Many patients struggle with chronic fatigue, and you can oftentimes we have this challenge where they have mold toxicity. Now, not many people know about mold toxicity. Yes, you can test 2 or 3 things in blood. You can send tests away to the States, which is really, really expensive. You could also do a VCS test, so visual test, which is an online test, which gives you a very good indication of if this person has mold toxicity or not. But those are the patients that have been going from practitioner to practitioner because nobody believes them that they are tired, that they feel like death warmed up. And you do the mold toxicity thing, they go through a very, very, very intense process where they have to detoxify, and it's not fun, but they get their lives back. Many of these patients are the ones that also will then be sent in the end to a psychiatrist because it's all in your head. It's not always. Listen to the patient and believe them. Also know when to just put a bit of a healthy boundary in place, because we oftentimes find that the patients have been passed along from practitioner to practitioner. If somebody starts listening to them, finally they start clinging. So we need to have those professional and healthy boundaries as well.
CP, I'm just giving you a time check. We're going to run over, and I think there's going to be quite a few questions.
Okay, cool. Let me then, safety reporting. We need to make sure that we report to each other. There's no set reporting structure in Africa that I know of for natural medicines. So let's be aware of that. Then we have spoken about the health disparities, continual ethical reflection and improvement. We've gone through that. Now, one thing that I do just want to highlight is the Consumer Protection Act gives these 6 things. The patient has the right to access or to take you on for lack of communication, inflated pricing, side effects treatment of the treatment, personal conflict, perceived lack of value of money, and then the urgency of time versus the urgency versus the time taken. So I'm not going to then go very much deeper into the CPA, which is a lot of writing, but it's there to protect our patients and our clients. Okay, so last slide is there are numerous ethical challenges and considerations, but we can balance this. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, CP. That was a brilliant presentation, and as always, you present with absolute passion, and it's wonderful to see. I see Dr. Edelin wants to ask a question. So, Herman, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Jackie. Dr. van Eerden, thank you very much. I'm a neurosurgeon and medical legal practitioner, So you can call me allopathic if you like. I want to compliment you and all my other friends and colleagues who venture into this very important field of integrative medicine, because I believe that is the future of healthcare. And I believe that allopathic medicine is more involved with illness care, and healthcare practitioners should be involved in healthcare. I also want to compliment you on what I perceived not so much as an integrative medicine talk, but an ethical talk. And what I heard is you were talking from your heart. So you were not just reading a list of rules and regulations that you'd read in a book or somebody taught you. You were talking as a truly committed ethical healthcare practitioner. That is rewarding, it's stimulating, and it is inspirational. And it is through an ethical approach that is maybe the most powerful weapon of any, or tool, should I say, rather than weapon, of any healthcare practitioner. I would like to take issue with you on one aspect. That is the placebo and the how you described it.
Okay.
Obviously, if you give me a pill with a known effect and I take it and it has that effect, that's a pharmacological effect which is predictable. If you give me a sugar pill and tell me it's going to fix me, and it does fix me, then it's not the pill that fixed me. It was my belief that the pill would fix me. And that would then be a placebo effect.
Yeah.
So it is an example of psychoneuroimmunology. It is the conviction in my mind that actually cured me. And you as a practitioner, I decided to trust you. I decided to trust your pill, but it was my own mind that fixed me. That to me is a placebo effect.
Yeah.
You described was more than that, because your neuro-linguistic programming that you were talking about is actually a form of psychotherapy. So you were giving treatment in the form of whatever drips or frequencies or whatever you were giving, but you were also giving talking therapy. You said certain things. And I don't think you can call that a placebo effect. I think that is the effect of a psychotherapist. The therapist or the healthcare practitioner says something which convinces the recipient to believe something, and then the final common pathway is the same. It is their belief that fixes it. And my final comment, I want to sound a word of caution about informed consent, because it sounded as though before the patient sees you, they sign an informed consent. They cannot possibly be properly informed before they see you. They can only be properly informed after the consultation.
Yes.
So a document that was signed before discussing it with you has got legal problems and also ethical problems.
Okay.
Also, you cannot legally have informed consent as a blanket for integrative therapy. It would have to be for each issue. I'm going to give you light therapy into your vein, or I'm going to give you vitamin C into your vein, or I'm going to give you glutathione. These are the potential benefits. These are the risks. Would you like it? So I do actually think, even though it's a pain, that valid informed consent, you would need to have a document for each intervention.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you for that. I appreciate those inputs, and very, very well taken. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Herman. I see Francois has also raised his hand.
Hello. Thank you. Carl, I've got a specific question regarding during the COVID pandemic. So a lot of doctors used alternative treatments or non-mainstream treatments. I mean, we didn't have any proof that it works or whatever, except for personal experience. And on the question of informed consent, and I mean literally just the time factor that the patient sitting in front of you cannot breathe. They heard about you and they heard that you have success in treatments, and now they pitch up at your door. You don't know them from anywhere. They just want to be cured. A funny story was one of my patients came basically on a Monday and told me the next week, Friday, they have a wedding in Cape Town and they need to be ready by the coming Sunday. So how do you do this, informed consent and everything, when in alternative or integrative medicine, we have tools that actually work, but we do not have time to get informed consent from someone that cannot breathe.
Yeah.
How do you?
Now that brings up another ethical dilemma, doesn't it? So in a situation such as that, if you do then apply the therapy, you take responsibility in a greater way than without the informed consent. You can still do it. So the informed consent for us, because of the history that we have had with integrative medicine, that's why we are very hard on implementing that. But yes, emergencies are going to happen, and am I going to wait for a piece of paper? Yeah, not really. But just then be aware that your liability is potentially then quite a bit higher. Does that answer?
Yes, it does, but it doesn't solve my problem.
I don't think there is truly an answer. I'm sorry. So yes, you can decide to take that risk, and I mean many of our practitioners who have done that during the pandemic did take the risk, because there's a person who is in urgent need. So let's take the same example. Somebody is in a car crash and they need emergency surgery. You're not going to wait for them necessarily to wake up and sign a document. If they need the surgery, they need the surgery now. And then the legalities follow up. And that then also gives you leeway, more protection. Let's put it that way. Leeway sounds like we're trying to wriggle ourselves out of things, but it gives us protection if the patient comes back with complaints that the situation was an emergency, and so health professions or the courts will then should then look at it in a very different way.
Can I just intervene there, Francois? There is protection. First of all, the Helsinki Agreement, have a read of that. It does cover what a doctor can do in the event of a life-threatening situation. The second thing is, one of the things that we did was that, you can't really take informed consent from a hypoxic patient. I have patients who don't remember a week of their care. So how can I ask that person to sign a form when their oxygen saturations are sitting at 74%? So one of the things that we did do was we got off-label. We made it clear that some of these medications were being used in an off-label manner. We printed those forms up, and we got informed consent from the relative, because somebody else could go and have a conversation with the relative while the medical team were actually working on the patient. But you can, and Herman, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is the Helsinki Agreement covers a practitioner in the event of an emergency.
I agree with you, Jackie.
And that's really short from you. Normally we hear a little more than I agree with you.
No, but when you talk sense, what must I add?
Great, but always remember the Helsinki Agreement. I've used it in a number of times in the past, and you can't really argue with it. One question I'd like to ask you, CP, is that, you know, a lot of patients come looking for an integrative approach because they're tired of conveyor belt medicine.
Mm.
And in a sense, the failure of conveyor belt medicine, which becomes compulsory for patients who are on medical aid schemes, because you can't see a patient in 7 minutes and do very much more than write a script or do a blood test. So do you think that it is, you know, we apologize for doing integrative medicine and long consults, but the patients are coming to us because they're tired of being treated like a number. And I read a very good article recently on the need for the divorce between medicine and the healthcare system. Another comment that was made, and this was made by somebody very senior and somebody I did not expect to make it. I was in a conversation, and I can't mention who it was, but it was somebody very senior. They've basically said, if we look at how Chinese doctors practice, they interchange Chinese and allopathic medicine. If we look at how I worked in the Middle East for 12 years. Ayurvedic doctors don't hesitate to prescribe a herbal and an allopathic medicine. Why is it that Africa, this has been denied? And the question was actually being posed at very senior sort of CDC kind of level. We almost have been deprived of a rich heritage of safe therapeutic agents. And on the subject of cannabis, you know, I've always been like, I was raised very conventionally. So, you know, weed was like this horribly toxic substance, and everyone was going to go psychotic and end up in some sort of motivational abyss. I don't know a single patient, and I'll be honest, who's actually died from medicinal cannabis. I know a lot of patients that have died from alcohol. I know a lot of patients that have died from cigarette smoking. And cannabis was actually criminalized by the tobacco and the alcohol industry in about 1937, I think. So I think as doctors, we need to continually look at what drives commercially illegitimization of these substances and what drives our own mind, because we'll perceive something as illegal, but in actual fact, it's safe. So I kind of wanted to make the two comments that I don't think that we as integrative doctors are doing anything wrong. The patients are coming to us because they want someone to listen to them, particularly after the COVID time. And I think the other thing to say is why in Africa, there's a whole book written by Michael Gelfand. I really would recommend you get it. He was a brilliant professor of medicine in Zimbabwe, and he wrote the Traditional Healers book. And it's like a Bible. It's so thick, and it's full of all this incredible information. Why haven't we been allowed to explore it in Africa? Because apart from the fact that a lot of these substances are used by 95% of the patient population in this country, the second issue is just from a commercial point of view, we could be exporting this, and our countries could be doing as well as Chinese and Ayurvedic countries. And I'm just interested in your view on the regulatory control and why is Africa so controlled?
I think we have taken the principle of specialization and super specialization too far in Africa. You know, you talk about allopathic medicine and the traditional, the African medicines, but let's take a look at allopathic medicine alone. There's a lot of professional jealousy between practitioners and groups of practitioners. We know that the oncologists and the cardiologist, I'm taking examples now, but they don't necessarily get along. And the one group looks down on the other, and it's vice versa. And so even within allopathic medicine, there is a lot of silo thinking. Now that comes from the training. You think about systems. The body is a set of systems, and each system works almost independently. And so from that mindset, from that training, we use what we know, and what we don't know scares us. And Africa has a lot of fear. And so to me, and I might be completely wrong, but for me, this is a sign of the fear that we have for each other. And so I don't understand whole plant medicine, for example. I don't understand that plants can take you on journeys. Plant medicine or plant journeys are, in my mind, phenomenal things. But it freaks people out who were taught to think in a very specific way. And that is not the case in for your Ayurvedic doctors, for example. They embrace everything. We always, when Craig teaches, he says, if you break your arm, you're not going to ask for vitamin C. You're going to ask for morphine. So give the right thing at the right time. Then give the vitamin C afterwards to support the body. But it is, to me, just purely the fact that we have silo thinking as a culture, and if it doesn't fit into my silo, I don't want it.
Thanks, CP. I couldn't agree with you more. And one of the things that I think, as we sort of end off, is, as we were speaking before we actually opened the meeting about ivory tower encephalopathy, the higher someone goes up the academic scale, particularly if they no longer consult at face-to-face level, or they only have medical students or registrars present to them, I think that there is a tunneling that happens. And I really think we've lost big picture thinking, and it's not doing any service to the patient. And I think that, getting back to the medical aid system, the healthcare systems in the NHS or Medicare in Australia, they are just, the money is being spent on lab tests. Junior doctors can't make a clinical diagnosis anymore. I'm sufficiently old that it took so long to get the imaging and the blood test that I had to treat the patient before I got the testing. Now I see junior doctors delaying that golden hour because they don't have the hemoglobin, when the patient's quite clearly exsanguinating and is very pale.
Yeah.
So I think that somehow, I don't know how we're going to get common sense back into medicine, but I don't think it's in large double-blind placebo-controlled trials that require 20 to 30,000 people in order to see whether something works in an individual. So that's kind of how I'd like to end it. I'm sure Herman will have something to say on that.
Cool. And I see Dr. Malunga has a hand up. Sorry, Jackie.
I will follow
Thank you, Doc. Very good. Thank you so much for that. Just really a brilliant presentation. Just a quick question, Doc. In Namibia, we are a very tiny group, like a drop in the ocean, practicing complementary medicine, and we're not getting the enough support that we need to have, and we still have doctors that are refusing to work with us. So what would be your advice for us moving forward and how to actually continue practicing?
Make new friends. The community grows slowly, but once it starts growing, it goes phenomenally quick. So in Namibia, we've actually done a couple of lectures. So many of the Namibian doctors joined the South African integrative spaces, so that they still have people to work with. It's not necessarily in Namibia themselves, but there are many practitioners that then one can link to. We still have doctors, specialists who, when the patient tells them that they come to our practice, they chase the patient out of the consult rooms. So I don't think it's necessarily going to change soon from that side, but the more people we educate, the more people we bring to talks like these, the bigger we grow our community.
Thank you, CP. And one other thing that we are considering, I'm sure you know Anthony Rees, who won against SAPRA over the herbal medicines.
Yeah.
I've now completely forgotten what his alliance is called, but I think it's Alliance of Natural Health Practitioners. And if we can also join with other alliances of natural health practitioners, which is not exclusive, it can include allopathic doctors and even neurosurgeons, even medico-legal neurosurgeons. So if we were to have the Alliance of Natural Health Practitioners, and particularly I joined the traditional medicine course at the University of Zimbabwe, and I was one of 3 allopathic practitioners there. There must have been, the lecture hall was almost full. And there were biochemists and agronomists and some incredible scientists within that room. And if we start to look at people who are healers, stop putting out this image of someone who's throwing bones and has got ostrich feathers on his head as a natural health practitioner. I think what we probably need is we need the numbers, and I do wonder if we shouldn't be including some form of training in natural health for the allopathic doctor and some sort of allopathic type training for the natural health practitioner, and come out with a common, not a, as we were discussing before, what did you call that certificate? A
health promotion officer.
Health promotion officer. Those kind of people, then we've got a lot more people on the ground, and the patients will want to come and see them because the patients will vote with their feet, ultimately.
Yeah.
So
Jackie,
I think maybe this could be the start of some sort of alliance.
Definitely. I have to be extremely rude. We're going to have a load shedding in 2 minutes, so I'm just noting that. Dr. Edeling, thank you. Sorry, you've been waiting to say something for so long. Apologies.
Thank you very much, Dr. van Eden. I was actually just going to respond to Jackie because she asked me for a response. Jackie, I love the term you have coined, ivory tower encephalopathy. I think it's an absolutely marvelous term. It goes along with one of my big things I always like to talk about, is that we have a conflict around the world in terms of medicine and other things, of authority versus evidence. One group in the world decides to follow authority, whether the authority is right or wrong. I prefer to follow the evidence. And to follow the evidence is scientific. Dr. van Eden, what you were talking about in integrative medicine is scientific. Both allopathic and natural and Chinese and traditional, all kinds of healing are scientific.
Yeah.
But there's a difference to the extent or rigidity with which practitioners properly apply the scientific method. And whatever we are doing, if we want to be truthful and realistic, we have to apply the proper scientific method, follow the evidence, and be ethical all the way. And I think you gave a very good lecture about that. So thank you, and thank you, Jackie.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Jackie.
Okay, I think, sorry, I'm just trying to get my microphone to unmute. I think we should end it there. I think we'll leave the screen on for a bit for the questionnaire. So I keep trying to click into it, but then I have to click back onto the screen and I lose it. So let's leave the questionnaire up for a bit. And thank you for a very, very stimulating discussion. I think it's going to be one of those ones that where a lot of people will be watching the recording.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, it was lovely spending time together.
Dr. CP, thank you very much. Thank you very much for making the time. Extended gratitude to yourself and the Golding Institute, for extending your expertise and your time with respect to today's lecture. Thank you. To the rest of the audience, I think it wouldn't be a lecture without your participation, together with your making the time. So extended gratitude as well to yourselves. Much appreciated. The team at Intellectus as well for working to administer this. Extended gratitude to yourself. To the team at Evercare Health, together with EverLife, for steering us as Intellectus in the right direction to work to extend these sort of discussions. Extended gratitude to yourself as well. If I can please request, there is a link on the chat. Aside from the link for the attendance register, there is a second link. If you can have a look at the last message on the chat, there is a link for an assessment. If you can please go into that link, complete the assessment, that will enable the CPD certificates to be circulated to yourselves. So if you can, please visit that link before you completely go off, to enable these certificates to be circulated appropriately. Again, Dr. C.P. van Eerden, this is the first and of many more discussions of this nature. This being our first that we've hosted through Intellectus, but definitely looking forward to many more lectures in integrative health and solutions thereof. Much appreciated. Colleagues, a very good evening. Please feel free to log off once you've completed the assessment and the attendance register. A very good evening.
Bye-bye.